The text came through while I was helping customers at my boutique. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 22-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Ha 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 ha. My hands didn't shake as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I helped Mrs. Anderson pick out a scarf. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just ended our marriage via text was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Anderson left, her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper, before typing my response. Good luck. My name is Julia, and at 38, I had just received what might be the most heartless goodbye in history. But while David was likely basking in his grand exit, picturing me in tears over his betrayal, I calmly locked up my boutique for the day. The signs had been there for months. Late nights at work that didn't match his pay stubs. Sudden password changes on his phone. The newfound obsession with the gym. The shopping trips for trendy clothes, all part of some desperate attempt to recapture his youth. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for dinner for two at an expensive restaurant, a night he had sworn he was working late. That same evening, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. A week later, when he suggested merging our accounts to simplify things, I smiled and agreed, while quietly transferring my personal savings to the new account. The joint account he had just emptied. It held exactly enough to keep him from getting suspicious, about 2 months' worth of regular deposits. The rest was safely tucked away, along with detailed records of every questionable transaction he'd made over the past year. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother begging. Amanda and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Amanda. The new receptionist at his office. I met her at the company's holiday party, watched her laugh too loudly at David's jokes, saw the way she touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. She was young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to believe she was special. I didn't bother replying. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd consulted 2 months ago after spotting hotel charges on our credit card statement. It's time, I said simply. He just made his move, she replied. The papers are ready. Should I have him served in Miami? No rush. Let him think he's won first. Another text from David lit up my screen. I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger, after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop. The successful boutique I had built from the ground up. The one that generated more income than his middle management position. The one whose profits I had carefully kept separate from our joint finances. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would soon greet him in Miami. Let him savor his moment of triumph. That evening, I spent time in our home, my home, technically. I had inherited it from my grandmother and had never added David to the deed, despite his repeated suggestions. Another lucky instinct that had paid off. I found our wedding album. Ethan looked so different back then, before his midlife crisis turned him into a caricature of his former self. These days he wore shirts too tight for his softening middle, tried too hard to connect with the 20-somethings at his office, and used slang that sounded ridiculous coming from a man of 46. My phone kept buzzing with texts from him, each more condescending than the last. I've been planning this for months. Sarah understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your own age. Already told my family. They agree. We grew apart. It's nobody's fault, really. I screenshotted each message, adding them to my growing folder of evidence. Let him dig his hole deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of premeditation and his gleeful announcement about draining our joint account. But the last text caught my attention. BTW. I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. LOL. Perfect. I picked up my phone and called the credit card company. Mrs. Bennett speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami, booked today. Hotel charges at the Royal Palm. Also, I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of the fraud? Text messages from my husband admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our bank account. I'll be happy to forward them. The representative's professional tone couldn't quite hide her satisfaction as she canceled the charges. Ethan and Sarah would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets invalidated and their hotel reservation cancelled. My phone buzzed again. Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I laughed out loud at that one. Did he really think he had any claim to my grandmother's house? Had his ego grown so large that he'd forgotten whose name was on the deed? Another buzz. and I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your half. My half of my business? The boutique I had built from scratch? The one I'd funded myself while he complained about my long hours and dismissed it as a hobby. I poured myself a glass of wine. The good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Ethan would learn some hard truths about property law and separate assets. But tonight, I would enjoy the quiet and plan my next chapter. The next morning brought a flurry of increasingly angry texts from him. What the heck did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel cancelled our reservation. Answer me. I silenced my phone. It was Friday, always the busiest day at my boutique. A new shipment of designer handbags had just arrived. Life goes on even when your husband runs off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, my phone rang again. It was Ethan's mother. Olivia, dear, she began. Ethan told us everything about how you've been so controlling. He says you drove him away. Now he claims you're being vindictive, causing problems with his travel plans. I put Ethan's mother, Linda, on speakerphone while I arranged a window display at the boutique. Did he happen to mention emptying our joint account and charging flights and hotel reservations for himself and his girlfriend on our credit card? Silence. Well, he said you left him no choice, that you've been cold and distant. Linda, I have the texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money, or maybe the one where he mocked my age? Another pause. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that message was inappropriate. I appreciate the call, Linda. I've always liked you, but I think it's best we end this conversation here. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Ethan's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Goodbye, Linda. By late afternoon, Ethan's sister, Caroline, was already spreading family gossip through mutual friends. Apparently, Ethan and Sarah were stuck at a budget motel near the airport. Miami dreams temporarily derailed. He had tried using his personal credit cards, but those had been maxed out for months. Another red flag I had noticed. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll get the papers at his new motel address. Oh, and his girlfriend's social media posts are providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some choice comments about you. I smiled, thinking of my own collection of evidence. A year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, and text messages that prove premeditation. Ethan had been so focused on his grand escape that it had never occurred to him I might be watching, waiting, preparing. My phone buzzed again. You think you're so smart, but I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of Ethan's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about separate assets and business ownership. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply being prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday turned out to be everything I could have hoped for. Ethan showed up in his new wardrobe, designer jeans too tight for his age and a blazer that screamed midlife crisis. Sarah waited outside, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer presented our case methodically. Ethan's gleeful texts about draining our account, the credit card fraud, the documented history of hidden expenses, each piece of evidence carefully collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Ethan's hastily hired lawyer began. My client admits to some rash decisions. However, Mrs. Bennett's actions have been vindictive and calculating. Calculating? My lawyer countered smoothly. You mean prudent. Protecting her separate assets and maintaining detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive. That's smart business. The judge reviewed my documentation, the deed to the house listed solely in my name, the boutique's incorporation papers with me as the sole owner, and the meticulous separation of business and personal finances, something Ethan had always criticized. Mr. Bennett, the judge addressed Ethan directly, you admitted, via text message, to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud, The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation clearly shows is separate from marital assets. The business grew during our marriage, Ethan's lawyer interjected. My client is entitled to a share. The business was established before the marriage. My lawyer responded swiftly. Mrs. Bennett maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. We have detailed records of every penny invested and earned. I watched as reality began sinking in for Ethan. He thought it would be simple: drain our accounts, run off with his girlfriend, and claim half of my business in the divorce. He'd never understood why I insisted on keeping things separate, mocking my careful bookkeeping as obsessive. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Bennett is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Ethan protested. We spent it on... Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, the judge interrupted sharply. And Mr. Bennett, this court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund adventures with a paramour. Outside the courthouse, I heard Sarah questioning Ethan about their Miami plans. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor. I was heading back to the business he had never understood or respected. The next few weeks brought a series of increasingly desperate moves from Ethan. He tried claiming the boutique had been his idea. He insisted he remembered investing money in its early days. At one point, he even suggested he had been my business partner all along. Each claim was swiftly disproven by my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer observed. His girlfriend's social media shows they're staying at her studio apartment now. Apparently, living on a receptionist's salary isn't quite the glamorous escape he imagined. As Ethan's situation grew more precarious, his family started reaching out. Their tone was markedly different from the initial accusations they had hurled my way. We had no idea, his sister Carolyn admitted during a call. He told us you'd been cold, controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw the texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. Ethan's mother Linda called again, this time in tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. At least, I thought I did. I let her call go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it just felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. Ironically, the boutique thrived, boosted by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show support, often leaving with far more than they had planned to buy. One customer said something interesting. My assistant mentioned as she rang up a designer handbag. Her ex tried the same thing, thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Ethan. His tone swung wildly between anger and manipulation. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. Through the grapevine, I heard that Sarah was having second thoughts. Apparently, sharing her tiny studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford his own place wasn't the romantic adventure she had envisioned. The age gap that once seemed exciting during secret hotel meetings now felt different in the harsh light of reality. She's been posting about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes, my lawyer mentioned during an update call, and she removed her relationship status this morning. I almost felt sorry for Ethan. Almost. But then I remembered his ha-ha-ha after telling me he'd emptied our account. The casual cruelty of his comments about my age. The way he assumed I would be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else. Pride. Pride in my foresight. Pride in my quiet strength. Pride in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture from Ethan's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Sarah was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a co-worker her own age, according to office gossip. Ethan showed up in his old clothes. The designer wardrobe had apparently been returned to help repay the joint account he had emptied. His lawyer looked exhausted, likely from trying to find loopholes in my thoroughly documented separation of assets. Your Honor, Ethan's lawyer began, attempting one last argument. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support. Moral support? My lawyer interrupted, raising an eyebrow. You mean like these text messages belittling Mrs. Bennett's business as a little shop, or these social media posts calling it her hobby? The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house. I kept my business. I kept all my separate assets. Ethan got his personal possessions and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. You've destroyed me, he hissed as we left the courthouse. I'll have to move. Back in with my parents. No, Ethan, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too. His mother, Linda, was waiting outside, ready to drive him to her house, his new home. At 46, the irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who had mocked my age was now living in his childhood bedroom while I continued running my successful business. You planned this all along, he accused. You knew this would happen. Numberwide just paid attention, and unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records. Linda stepped between us. That's enough, Ethan. You've embarrassed yourself enough already. As they walked away, I heard her scolding him. Honestly, what were you thinking? A 22-year-old? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those horrible texts? I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling nothing but relief. Ethan had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that cruel text. Instead, he had merely set my carefully laid plans in motion. My phone buzzed, not with texts from Ethan this time, but with notifications of new orders from my boutique's website. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he had imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique had expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Ethan struggled to rebuild his life, the little shop he had dismissed was thriving. I had hired 3 new employees and launched an online store that was gaining traction nationally. News of Ethan's situation trickled back to me through mutual acquaintances. He had tried dating apps, but women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his history through office gossip, steered clear. Melissa had apparently warned her friends about him, even sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she left. His career had suffered too. The company's HR department launched an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The promotion he had been expecting went to someone else, someone without a history of inappropriate relationships with reception staff. He even tried to claim age discrimination, Ethan's sister, Caroline, told me during an unexpected visit to the boutique. Said they were punishing him for dating someone younger. HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see Caroline in my store, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Ethan had alienated his own family. I know we didn't support you at first, she admitted, running her fingers over a silk scarf. He played the victim so well. But after watching how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me updated on Ethan's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied. His claims of unfair distribution were dismissed. Based on the evidence of his own actions, he actually tried arguing that his text about emptying the account was just a joke. My lawyer told me, laughing. The judge asked if haha made theft any less illegal. The boutique's success brought unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned ex-wife, but as a savvy businesswoman who had protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs reached out asking for advice about keeping business and personal finances separate. The best protection is preparation, I told one young woman who reminded me of Sarah, and always trust your instincts. Ethan's mother, Linda, still called occasionally, usually after he had done something particularly self-destructive. He tried online gambling, hoping for a quick fix to his financial problems. She sighed during one call. Then he got involved in some pyramid scheme that promised fast returns. Each time he tries to get back on his feet, he just digs himself deeper. She paused. His father and I even offered to help him, but only if he took responsibility for his actions, but he's still blaming everyone else. You, Sarah, his company, the judge. I listened politely but kept my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My life had moved forward, filled with plans for a third boutique location and a potential expansion into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Ethan's impact on my life hung in a frame in my office, a screenshot of his final text before I blocked his number. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Below it sat my latest business award, proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique location. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about a successful businesswoman expanding her brand. Ethan's betrayal had become nothing more than a footnote in my success story. During the event, Sarah unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever, or maybe I just felt that much stronger. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I believed everything he told me, how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his dreams. But then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough. I continued arranging a display of designer sunglasses. Those weren't his dreams, Sarah. They were escapes. There's a difference. I know that now, she replied. He tried to move in after you froze the accounts. Thought my studio apartment would be temporary. But after 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I finally understood what you meant. About the difference between dreams and escapes. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Let me guess, he had big plans but no way to fund them? Exactly, she said, managing a smile. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off. Once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency took off. It's definitely increased in value, Sarah said with a small smile. Then she shook her head. But I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real. After she left, my assistant manager leaned in and whispered, "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I replied with a smile. "That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." Then, gesturing toward a young couple admiring our designer handbags, I added, "Speaking of lessons, let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line." The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, resilience, and the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized one key point: protect your assets. Ethan's mother, Linda, called one last time. Not to discuss Ethan, but to thank me. "You taught our family an important lesson," she said, "about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty." Ethan's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems. But we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. I reflected on that word, legacy, as I reviewed plans for a fourth boutique location. Ethan had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he had inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger and more successful. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. Mark filed another petition to revisit the settlement. The judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I smiled, picturing Ethan in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. 2 years after Ethan's cruel text message, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic? Not divorce, not betrayal. It was about building and protecting a successful business. My story had evolved from a cautionary tale into an inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman in the audience raised her hand. "My husband says I'm being paranoid," she said. "He says marriage means sharing everything. Am I wrong to keep some things separate?" "My ex-husband said the same thing," I replied, smiling. "Right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce. trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. The boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each more successful than the last. The little shop Ethan had once mocked now employed 30 people and had been featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard Ethan had finally moved out of his parents' house into a small apartment above a garage. He had taken a lower-paying job after his former company downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring. Ethan's dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though the photo he used was clearly outdated. Ironically, Sarah had become a regular customer at my original boutique location. She had earned her business degree and started her own social media consulting company. "You inspired me," she told me once. "You showed how a woman can build something lasting instead of falling for empty promises." I kept Ethan's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain but as proof of how far I'd come. Beneath it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, I stood before a crowd of employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single modest shop into the flagship store of a thriving business empire. Linda, Ethan's mother, attended. Though I hadn't sent her an invitation, she waited until the crowd thinned before approaching me. "I saw Ethan yesterday," she said, smoothing the fabric of her designer dress, one she'd purchased from my store. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had." She paused, meeting my gaze. "He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." I thought about that text message, his casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him. He had expected me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I had built something stronger. Each new boutique location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. As I reflected on that, the young saleswoman I had hired last month, coincidentally also named Sarah, walked over with a question about the new inventory system I had implemented. While explaining the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the store window. I saw what Ethan had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older, but one getting wiser, stronger, and more successful. His cruel text message had been meant as an ending. Instead, it had become a beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than being reduced to someone else's midlife crisis. The lesson from this story is clear. Never underestimate the power of preparation, self-worth, and independence. In life, relationships may end, and people may disappoint you, but the ability to stand strong and build something for yourself is the ultimate success. Always protect your assets, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that your dreams are insignificant. In today's world, where personal and professional lives often overlap, keeping clear boundaries is essential. Your worth isn't defined by who stands beside you, but by what you achieve and how you rise after setbacks. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Success, happiness, and peace are the true victories. So, to anyone facing a similar journey, believe in yourself, prepare wisely, and keep moving forward. Good luck, and thank you for listening to my story.